Welcome to the Ben Stanley Show. This is episode 0, where I will introduce the show, go through a brief summary of my story from really a pretty good childhood and upbringing to a really difficult marriage and divorce, to me not being able to make any sense of that, to landing in some pretty dark and dissatisfying places, to doing this and trying to metabolize that confusion and pain into connection and purpose. I'll wrap up by talking about my vision for this show. Let's get started. So who is this Ben, and where did he come from? I, Ben, having been born of goodly parents, therefore I was taught somewhat in all the learning of my father. That's a joke, Mormon joke. That is a reference to the first chapter and verse of the Book of Mormon, for those who don't get it. In all seriousness, though, I feel like I really lucked out in the parents department. I feel like I was born of goodly parents. I wasn't able to track down where this original quote came from, but I think I heard it first from a Brene Brown podcast or something like that. Quote, "No one escapes childhood unscathed," end quote. I think that's true, and I sometimes think about how I wish my parents had done some things differently, but on the whole, I count myself extremely lucky to have had parents who were kind and honestly trying to do their best to give me a good life. I've never had any serious reason to doubt their genuine love, care, and concern for me, and that's pretty cool to be able to say. I grew up in southern Utah in a solidly suburban, mostly retirement community called St. George. I've bounced around a few other places in my adult life, but I keep finding my way back, and currently I'm living here again. It was a great place to grow up. I had a lot of really good friends and mentors, and the Mormon Church was a really big part of that. From the efforts of my parents, the influence of a lot of good people, and the narrative order of the church, I inherited high self-esteem and a strong personal identity. I was a child of God who had infinite worth, just like my Father in heaven. I knew where I came from, why I was here, and where I was going. I had lots of opportunities to grow and develop through sports, music, both spiritual and secular education, and lots of other social activities. I really latched onto my identity as the smart or gifted kid, threw myself into my academic pursuits, and graduated as valedictorian of my high school class. I decided to go to college at the church's flagship institution of higher ed, Brigham Young University in Provo. I served a 2-year proselytizing mission for the church in Portugal and came back to finish a degree in economics from BYU. As far back as I can remember, I wanted more than anything to have a satisfying, loving marriage. I was always very sensitive and romantic, and I really leaned into Mormon teachings about how marriage was basically the most important thing we could do in life. I built my whole identity around it, and despite wanting very badly to find my eternal companion as soon as I got back from my mission at age 21, I had the nearly unbearable trial of remaining single until I was almost 26. It's a little funny looking back, but this really was quite distressing for me at the time. I won't get into the details here, but my marriage turned out to be deeply unsatisfying and even miserable, which brought on my big crisis. After 4.5 years of trying and failing to make our relationship work, my wife left me to move in with her parents, and we were divorced almost a year later. I was devastated. So in the midst of separation and divorce, I tried to turn to my faith, and more specifically to my personal relationship with God, for help, guidance, or support. But it all just felt hollow and entirely insufficient to the task of making sense of what I was going through. I decided to step away from my religious community and from theism altogether to try to find other systems that could better account for what I had experienced and give me more useful tools for coping with it. So where does that put me now? I'm still figuring it out, but I'll share a few of the concepts or labels that I feel I align with most at the moment. I would define myself as an agnostic atheist, meaning although I strongly believe there is no God, I'm not going to tell you I have certainty there is no God. I'm fairly nihilistic. I don't think there is any inherent meaning or purpose to life. I'm also attracted to absurdism, which some might describe as the position that the inherent meaninglessness of life implies that we have both the opportunity and the responsibility to choose the meaning of our lives. I also really resonated with pragmatism, and I've called myself a pragmatist at times, but when I've had conversations about this with other people who have studied philosophy, I've got some pushback as to whether or not my beliefs truly align with pragmatism. So that's probably going to be a deep dive in a future episode. I'm someone who's pretty skeptical of all things religious or spiritual, but I also think we're storytelling animals, meaning making creatures, and that the narratives we carry about our lives matter a lot. The belief in gods, angels, demons, universal consciousness, source, a creator, a grand plan for humanity, or anything supernatural doesn't really land for me, but I'm still capable of and quite interested in feeling awe and wonder and crafting a meaningful life. I'm a relativist, which applies both morally and epistemologically, so I don't believe in any absolute truths. But I also don't think that means all possible belief or value systems are therefore equally valuable or equally ridiculous. I also don't believe in free will. And circling back to what I opened with, agnosticism. I'm an agnostic about a lot more than just potential belief in God, and I think that's actually a bigger deal to me than whichever side of a particular debate I land on. I strongly believe you can't ever fully know what you don't know, so any knowledge I lay claim to is always going to be some degree of provisional, subject to change if my experience tomorrow suggests I ought to reconsider some things. This fundamental epistemic uncertainty is really the core of my new belief system. Okay, so let's talk about the show. This is going to be a narcissistic, solipsistic, selfish endeavor. This is the Ben Stanley Show, and I'm going to make it about me and what I want. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but I'm also not lying about this. I'm aiming for a certain flavor of enlightened self-interest and radical responsibility that can serve as a new foundation for a life that is meaningful, substantive, satisfying, and beautiful. Growing up, I received a lot of cultural messages that selfishness was bad or evil, but I no longer think that's the most helpful way to understand it. I'll probably dive into that in more detail in the future, but the main points are that I don't think the self is evil. It just is. The self, or the ego, if you will, desires and wants things. Some of the things the ego might want, like pleasure from dominating and inflicting pain on others, are bad. But other things, like deep belonging, love, and connection, are pretty great. So, with that out of the way, what do I selfishly want to inflict upon the world through this show? I can honestly and truly say that a lot of me really does care about making the world a better place, helping people who are hurting or feeling stuck, and offering others resources to help them live more meaningful and healthy lives. I want to focus on beliefs and values, drawing from philosophy, psychology, religion, science, spirituality, rationality, art, and personal experience to explore how our beliefs and values influence who we are and how we experience life. A big part of this isn't so grand or noble, though. I'm still very much in the middle of my journey of healing or growth or whatever you want to call it, and I'm trying to sort out my beliefs and values, my desires, and reconstruct my worldview. I want to tell my story and find a way to make it make sense. Also, since leaving religion, I have really missed the built-in community aspect. I found other groups that fill some of that gap for me, but finding my spiritual tribe has proven to be more elusive. I'm hoping to use this show as a way to have conversations and interactions about some of the weird, esoteric things I care a lot about, and maybe even roll that into creating a community of my own. Last thing I'll say about my vision for the show is that I just want to be seen and heard and liked and accepted, maybe even respected and admired. Part of this is just built-in human nature, and in my specific case, I think it might be exacerbated by coming from a culture that placed high value on conformity and authority. As much as I don't like authority to be the basis for why we believe or behave the way we do, it seems to be one of the most effective shortcuts we humans have developed to avoid the expensive and time-consuming work of verifying everything on our own. I do want to be seen as an authority people can trust to be honest, thoughtful, compassionate, careful, and rigorous in my thinking and feeling about what it means to be human and to live a good life. And my commitment to you is that I will do my best to be genuine and authentic. even if that sometimes means saying things people might not like or accept. So thank you for watching or listening. If you're interested in what I'm trying to do here, please like the video and consider subscribing. If there's something I said you're curious to hear more about, or if there's something in my summary of my beliefs that you think I might be wrong about, let me know in the comments, and you might get featured in a future video that delves deeper into that specific topic. Hope to be back here again soon. Have a meaningful day.